1924, two wealthy students from the University of Chicago kidnapped and murdered a 14-year-old boy, Bobby Franks, in what was dubbed by the media as the crime of the century. The culprits, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, carried out the crime not because of psychopathy, but as an intellectual exercise. They believed that their superior intellect would allow them to commit the perfect crime, and that their motive absolved them of any guilt. Both men grew up in the affluent Kenwood neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. Both were seen as child prodigies, skipping grades in school, and were acknowledged polymaths. The two knew each other socially, but while at the University of Chicago, they discovered a mutual interest in crime, which cemented their friendship. Leopold was also a devoted follower of Nietzsche, the German philosopher, whose theory of superior men justifying the existence of the human race has been consistently misunderstood and twisted by people like the Nazis. He managed to convince Loeb that they were above the laws set out for ordinary men, and the two embarked on a minor crime spree of theft, vandalism, and breaking and entering to validate their theory. Moving on to more serious crimes such as arson, they were upset when a lack of local media attention for their antics failed to materialize. Seeking to have their Superman status confirmed beyond doubt, they set about planning the perfect crime. At the time, they were just 19 and 18 respectively. After months of careful consideration, the two decided on the kidnap and murder of an adolescent. In a sadistic subplot for their own amusement, they devised a ransom demand, accompanied by a complex communication and delivery system, despite having no intention other than murder. The weapon to be used and disposal options had already been arranged. This done, Leopold&Loeb began stalking potential victims, mainly around the Harvard School for Boys in Kenwood. They eventually settled on 14-year-old Robert Bobby Franks, the son of a wealthy Chicago watchmaker. Loeb was the boy's second cousin and a neighbor, and Franks had even played tennis at the Loeb home. The plan was activated on the 21st of May 1924. Tailing Franks in a rented car on the boy's way home from school, Franks was persuaded to get into the car by Loeb to discuss a tennis racket. What happened next is not entirely clear, but it's believed that Leopold drove and Loeb struck Franks several times in the head with a chisel. With Franks dead and out of sight on the floorboard in the rear of the car, Leopold&Loeb drove to the prearranged spot near Wolf Lake in Indiana, 25 miles south of Chicago. There, at nightfall, they concealed Frank's body in a culvert and returned to Chicago. By the time they arrived, word was already out that Franks was missing. Leopold telephoned Frank's mother, calling himself George Johnson, and informing her that the boy had been kidnapped and ransom instructions would follow. After mailing a ransom note, burning their clothing, and cleaning up the rented car, they settled down for an evening of card playing. The following morning, Leopold resumed calling the Franks' house, this time with the elaborate instructions for ransom delivery. When word arrived that Frank's body had been found, it put an end to his cruel baiting of the family. The two murderers destroyed the typewriter on which the ransom note was typed, and a blanket that had been in contact with the victim, then went about their lives as if nothing had happened. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing. And please consider supporting my work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description.
What I've enjoyed of being in a fostering household.
Work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description. Thank you. An intensive police investigation began, with a reward attached. For some reason, probably arrogance, Leopold began blabbing to reporters and sharing his theories with detectives. As with anyone who attempts to insert themselves into such an investigation, he became a suspect. Police were further interested when a pair of eyeglasses with a specific hinge, sold only to 3 customers in Chicago, was found at the murder scene. Leopold was one of those 3, and a lame excuse about possibly losing them during a bird-watching trip convinced no one. Leopold&Loeb were eventually summoned for formal questioning on the 29th of May. An alibi, claiming to have spent the night driving around with 2 women, whose names they couldn't remember, was demolished by Leopold's chauffeur, who informed police that Leopold's car was being repaired on that night, so could not have been used. Faced with these facts, Loeb abruptly confessed, blaming Leopold for everything and stating that he was only driving the car. When Leopold confessed, he reversed their roles, but other than that, the details were broadly the same. Both admitted that it was a thrill kill, fueled by their delusions about Nietzsche's Superman, and the desire to commit the perfect crime. Leopold further admitted that the crime had not given him the fulfillment he hoped for. The trial was a media circus. Loeb's family hired the renowned criminal defense attorney, Clarence Darrow, at a cost of $70,000. Darrow took the case, as he was a staunch opponent of capital punishment. In the event, the trial was fairly unremarkable, since it was an open and shut case. Both men pleaded guilty, and sought mitigation in psychiatric or personality defects. The only memorable event was Darrow's summing up to the judge, 12 hours in all, in which he emphasized the youth of the defendants, the unfairness of the US justice system, and basically laid it on thick. The judge, perhaps bludgeoned into submission by Darrow's speech, spared Leopold&Loeb from death, instead sentencing them to life plus 99 years for the kidnapping. 12 years later, Loeb was murdered in prison by another inmate, James Day, who claimed that Loeb had made advances towards him. The evidence seemed to suggest that it might have been the other way round, but with sympathy for Loeb in short supply, Day got away with his claim of self-defense. Leopold was a model prisoner, assisting in the education of other inmates, and participating in a trial for an experimental malaria treatment. He wrote his autobiography, entitled Life Plus 99 Years, published in 1958 as part of an ongoing campaign to win parole. Despite criticism for a perceived lack of remorse, he won his freedom that same year. With the help of a Christian charity, he moved to Puerto Rico, becoming a medical technician in a hospital. Earning a master's degree at the University of Puerto Rico, he taught classes and rekindled his interest in ornithology. He died of a heart attack in 1971, at the age of 66. There have certainly been more gruesome crimes than those committed by Leopold&Loeb, but the arrogance behind their thrill killing is the most unsettling part. Having seen off the fad for eugenics in the 1920s, and the atrocious regime of Nazism in World War II, we must always be on our guard against the anti-human tendencies of members of the human race.
Hello, good morning. Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Hoodoo London. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the contents in this channel. I'd like to start by wishing all my subscribers and everyone a happy new year. I hope everyone's doing well. Today I'd like to talk about a murder case that happened in 1924 in Chicago, United States of America. And this happened to a 13 to 14-year-old boy called Bobby Franklin or Frankie. Bobby was abducted on his way home from school, and he was abducted by Leopold and Nathan Leopold. Leopold and Loeb were two best friends who studied in the university together. I believe they went to Harvard University. Nathan Leopold was very, very educated. He could speak 28 languages. And Mr. Robert Loeb, on the other side, was well educated too. He was very interested in studying in criminology and justice. And they too managed to abduct. They were just out for doing a crime. That's how sad and heartbreaking this case is. They were two educated young men who were 18 and 19 years old, who decided they were well privileged, they had money, they had everything, they had a life, but they decided to do a thrill kill. They just wanted to do a thrill kill for fun. So they tried to abduct another boy, but luckily the other boy's grandfather was sent someone to pick him up because the boy had a dentist appointment. So they decided at the end to abduct this boy, whose father was a watch salesman, and at the same time Robert Loeb, one of the murderers, was second cousin to the young boy's father. So he was kind of a distant family, but they decided and they chose that the victim that they were going to kill, unfortunately, was this 12 to 14-year-old boy called Bobby. After they abducted the boy, Nathan Loeb was driving the car, and Robert Loeb was escorted him. One of them managed to hit the boy, trigger warning, with a stone or with a heavy object on his head, and the boy died of severe injuries. So this was a thrill of kill. They both ended up getting life in imprisonment because their defense attorney or their lawyer put up a good fight and almost made a long poetry, a sentimental one, about not taking these two young men as lives. That will be a waste and all that. So the judge decided to give them life in jail. Robert Loeb died in prison. Another inmate killed him. And Nathan Leopold ended up being released from the prison when he was, I believe, 53 years old. He died at 63 years old of a heart attack. But he changed his ways in many ways. He tried to show remorseful. And basically what he's done is he's tried searching and researching for different kind of disorders, medications and such things and all. So he tried in a way to be remorseful and take accountability for what he's done. But this was a very famous killing. And these were two students who were very well educated. One was very fascinated and was studying criminology and justice, crime and justice. And the other one could speak over 28 languages fluent. So this case, when I was going through this case, it reminded me of of Mr. Brian Kohberger, who is arrested, allegedly charged for killing 4 victims, students in Idaho, Moscow victims. He came into he's charged for burglary because he came into their house without permission. Obviously, it wasn't a burglary, but it was going to a place uninvited at that time of the night. A witness even saw him. He managed to murder 4 of the victims, which is really horrible. People are still trying to understand and figure out what his motive was, but it was just a very sick killing, very disturbing killing, something that was so unnecessary, but that just shows not everyone has a sane, healthy mind. Such killings do take place. Such killings has always taken place, furthermore. And the only thing we can do to avoid such killings is maybe research more and study more and put in more financial means into mental health, into policing, into investigations, into detectives, into forensics. All of these branches do definitely need more research. In this day and age, we are dealing with social media, where these horrible, horrific suspects seem to be targeting their victims from. Let's be honest. We put a lot of our life, a lot into our profile, whether it's into Instagram, whether it's into TikTok, whether it's into Facebook, whether it's into YouTube. We do put a lot of ourselves and a lot about ourselves out there. People, including me, want our privacy, but at the same time, we put ourselves out there. So the question is, how much of ourselves do we want out there in the internet? It's a question to ask. Are we doing something useful in the internet to put ourselves out there? Because do not forget there are many sick people out in society, out in the world. And when I talk about mental health, to putting out investments and research into mental health and forensics, I believe are very important, because there are many people out there that are suffering with hidden mental health illness. Whether we see it or not, there are. You can see it too, especially when something sad and horrible and heartbreaking happens, like the killing and the slaying of the Idaho murders. Because somebody with a sane mind couldn't have just gone and done a horrific quadruple killings towards 4 innocent college students who weren't ready for a fight, who couldn't defend themselves, who had no chance defending themselves. When you're at home, you're supposed to be in the most safest space. You usually lock your house behind you. In Idaho, Moscow, and in many places, they may not even lock the house behind them, because they're used to the peace, quietness. They're used to their roommates coming, having access to the place when they're not there. So they've never found it important for them to do that. But now we can clearly see that it is important to lock your doors after you. Obviously, I live in London. It's a big city, and I feel it's important. And many of us Londoners feel it's important to lock our doors after us, because you never know who is around and who's capable of what. When you're in your home, I believe you should lock your doors Draw your curtains. People are different. Some people enjoy not having curtains, but I believe there's a consequences to how we keep our safety. We expect to be safe. We complain when we don't have safety around. But at the same time, we human beings put ourselves out there at times. Like, obviously, it's a matter of choice. But if you're without curtains and just say you live in the first floor, or you live in a house where your living room is on the first floor, and people can see to your house because you don't have curtains and you do not have anything covering your windows, and you could just decide to change your clothes. It's your house, you have your privacy, but at the same time, you don't have curtains, so people who are passing by, you don't know who's sane, who's insane, who is capable of doing what. So that is more about doing what is wise, doing what is right to keep yourself safe from people who are unsafe out there, people that can't be trusted. So in this case, these 4 students were in the house, and there were 2 more students, 2 more roommates sleeping, one in the first floor, one in the second floor. They never thought a crime like this or a insane, ruthless, heartless killer is going to come their way and slay them that day. It was so unfortunate that it happened, and now we are starting to get bits and pieces of Mr. Brian Kohberger, the alleged suspect, who's been charged for these 4 crimes. We're starting to get to know more and more about him as day goes by. He's from Washington Pullman. It's a university near Idaho, 20 minutes, 15 minutes from Idaho. His phone pinged 12 times to the area of where the students were killed or slain to death, the quadruple murders. But he has excuses. Like he said, he comes to shopping for Idaho, allegedly. So I'm not saying I'm totally against what he's done, and I'm not defending him at all, but I'm just saying we should be aware that his defense is going to try all the ways possible to defend him by saying that Idaho Moscow has better shopping, according to the client, Brian Kohberger. And yeah, you could say that he was invited by one of the students or one of the roommates who passed away, or one of the roommates who's living. Or you could say he was in that area for a different reason, like to visit a friend. So we still haven't heard of Brian Kohberger, period. Until the 22nd of June, we are not going to know more about this case. But hopefully, the 6 months is for the defense attorney, and for Brian Kohberger, his defense team, his lawyer, to defend him and find out the whole 411, what happened that day, what led to these murders, what was the motive. That is what everyone wants to know. What is the motive? What could have got, allegedly, someone to slay 4 young, pretty students who had their life together, who were loved by their friends and family, who did not have any reason for anyone to brutally murder them in this way? But then when you go back to the letter of Brian Kohberger, when he was a teen and he's 15 years old, and he's talking about the symptoms that he's going through and about his mental health state, he clearly mentions a lot that is going on through his mind. He says that he wishes he wasn't alive. He talks about him being very suicidal, and as a licensed mental health counselor and a cognitive behavior therapist, I do understand everything about having clients who are suicidal. So he must have been going through a lot in his mind. He must have felt helpless, useless, ashamed that he needed help, maybe not wanting to disturb or overload his parents with stress, that he needs help. The boy was clearly, this young man was clearly going through severe depression and had the suicidal thought with him almost every time. I wish that he got help at that time, at that age, when he really needed it most, because it could have been prevented. What happened on the 13th of November in Idaho, Moscow, was completely preventable. If somebody addressed the 15-year-old Brian Kohberger's problems when he was 15. Then he studied psychology in bachelor's, and then he studied criminology in his master's in Pennsylvania, and then he managed to study crime and justice. He did a 1-year semester in his PhD in Pullman, Washington, and he was, unfortunately, Brian Kohberger was the suspect that's being charged for killing the 4 students in Idaho, Moscow. Like I said, his phone pinged 12 times from August up to the 13th of June in these areas not far from the house in Idaho, Moscow. We don't know which of the 4 victims allegedly knew Brian Kohberger, or they may have not even known him at all. So it's important to find out what was the motive. For me, I can just speculate that he was having a just really having a difficult time with his mental health state. And since he felt like no one was helping him, maybe he was just like frustrated that he wasn't being accepted by the society, by making friends. Allegedly, he was kind of awkward when he was a teenager. He was he was overweight, so many of the students used to make fun of him, and he just was searching for someone to talk to, someone to be a friend. I'm not supporting him, but that is the truth. So he must have had real difficulties for wanting to kill himself. That tells you a lot about a person's mental health stand. So when he was fat or chubby in school, it was very awkward. Everyone bullied him mostly. Not everyone, but most of the students. Then he lost weight and he started bullying the other students. So it's like it comes round and round, basically. Even in psychology, that's the way it is usually when somebody is just like, when somebody's used to be bullied so long, and when they find someone younger than them, they start automatically bullying them without meaning to do that. So something like that was happening in his life, and let's not forget, Brian Kohberger started heroin, which is a serious, deadly drug. So he decided to use that, and maybe he was using that to kind of run away from his pain, and he was using that to lose a lot of weight, because it seemed like weight was his worst enemy. People were teasing him because of that, bullying him because of that. So you can imagine already being mentally depressed and maybe having a mental disorder, and then somebody starts heroin at such a young age, it kills the brain cells, and that can lead to serious mental disorders like schizophrenia, like antisocial personality disorder, and other mental health illness. So after he's done his heroin for so many years, he stopped doing that. He collected himself, started studying, and he got his degree in psychology as a bachelor degree, and then he continued taking his studies. He got his criminology masters in Pennsylvania, and then he continued studying. So he moved to Washington, Pullman, to get, once he got a semester in his PhD in crime and justice. So he was taking higher education. When he moved down to Washington, Pullman, he's only like 15 minutes away from Idaho, Moscow. So that's how he came all the way from the East Coast to Idaho, Moscow, which is really far from home. And he was even teaching as a teacher assistant. I would assume something to do with crime and justice or criminologist. But he was teaching students who wanted those departments. So he was a teacher, assistant teacher in high school, and at the same time he was a student himself studying for his PhD. He had a semester in his PhD, and he was continuing his studies until he committed this horrific crime. We still don't know what are the relations between him, Xana Kernodle, between Brian Kohberger and Kaylee Concalves. We don't know what's the relationship between Brian and Ethan Chapin. We don't know what's the relationship between Brian and Maddie Morgan. So basically, we still do not know what went wrong, how he knew these students. We don't know if he came across these students and maybe they bullied him, or maybe they passed remarks that he did not like, or maybe he could have been just a customer going to Maddie and Xana Kernodle's restaurant where they used to work in, the Mad Greek. Since he's a vegan and since he has OCD, that's another thing about his OCD that I want to talk about in another clip, so that I talk about OCD symptoms, the medication, the therapy, everything about OCD as much as I can. Since he has a OCD disorder, OCD is a mental health disorder, it is a neurologist disorder, and OCD is just, it depends what people have OCD with. It's a obsessive compulsive disorder. People usually are obsessed by doing something and they keep on repeating doing it. Like if it's cleaning, it's just a disorder that they have. What's it called? This is a repeated behavior that they keep on doing again and again. Just say that the house will be clean, but they will continue cleaning a certain space. Although it's over clean, they overdo the job. And that is because it comes a lot with the OCD that they have, the obsessive thoughts that they have. So it's a known fact that therapy is very important for the OCD patients. CBT, cognitive behavior therapist, is really helpful, and it's not because I'm a CBT therapist, it is the truth. OCD, another thing, is an anxiety disorder. It's always connected with anxiety. So obviously what is making these people continue with the obsessive disorder is the anxiety that is tearing up. Like they could go and lock their doors 20 times, although they know they have locked it. And that is just that they have this obsessive order of repeating it again and again. So it is some kind of fear is connected with it, obviously. They're always panicking, they always fear for the worst at times. So they always have a obsessive. It could be obsessive in cleaning, it could be obsessive like in Brian Kohberger's case that he's a vegan. So he is very obsessive in eating everything that's vegan and staying away from anything that's not vegan. We've even heard that he's told his auntie-in-law, his uncle, his wife, that he needed new pots, that she needed to buy new pots so that she could cook. He doesn't want to eat anything that has touched meat before. And it doesn't matter. Many people have been asking, how could he have OCD and still be killing human beings? Trigger warning. And it doesn't necessarily mean that just because he has that OCD disorder that he can't be doing this because it's not related to this or it won't make sense. It has nothing to do with that. People can do just the opposite of what they have in their disorder. So in this sense, I think for him it was a thrill kill, or for him it was a kill with a lot of rage, because we know those students were brutally murdered. And for me, the way I look at it is, he started, his first victim, I personally believe that he killed was Maddie, because he forgot the knife leather sheet near Maddie's legs, it was said. So I believe he started with Maddie, and I believe that Maddie is the victim. I can believe that when the news was saying that Kaylee was the target, I don't believe that. I believe Kaylee got a lot of scars and a lot of injuries because Kaylee was trying to defend Maddie and she was fighting for her life. But I believe it was Maddie he was after because he came to Maddie first. And then I don't believe anymore that he ran accidentally into Eaton and Xana. I believe he is coming for Xana too. This guy had certain targets and the house was targeted, but he knew which victims he wanted. Because he literally went to Xana and Xana wasn't far from her room. So the thug sound that everybody, the neighbors heard of the drop had to be Xana, because Xana was found on the floor. I hate to say that, but that is most likely the case. This man Brian must have felt insulted or felt like these students thought he was lesser worth than him. And already, let's not forget, he was already suffering of depression and he felt unwanted when he was much younger, like when he was 15, 16, 17, I believe 17, when he was writing that letter. So you can imagine all those memories must have gone back to him of being bullied in high school, being bullied in secondary school and such things. It must have definitely come back to him. Unless it was some other motive he had in this house. And what I mean by that is, I'll be honest, like I said, the driver that drove them, the private driver that drove Maddie and Kaylee, said clearly that he drove many other people to that house to pick up drugs. So I wonder, was maybe example dealing, was she the one who was dealing drugs? The reason I say that is it will make sense why she didn't call law enforcement at once. So because this was the words of the driver himself, it wasn't of me, and there could be some truth in that. But since this case is in trial, and since it's coming little by little, we need to wait and see what more nuggets we get out of this. The reason I hate to say that, I'm very mindful But I'm saying that because it was the private driver that said himself that he drove many people to buy drugs. So that means if people were selling drugs from that house, that is the reason possibly that they didn't call law enforcement. Another thing we know, and we've heard that from Brian's previous or old time friends, they said that Mr. Brian was, they said that Mr. Brian, or they said that the friend Brian used to use heroin. So that has something to say too. So if he was on drugs, the question is, did he stop drugs completely? Or could he had a relapse on drugs? Could he have gone to that house to buy something and maybe he felt like they took his money and ripped him off? It's just all thoughts, because all thoughts and speculations will come to you in a case like this. But the clip that I just played of Robert&Loeb and Nathan Leopold and Loeb in 1924 in Chicago, it was a thrill kill. They picked up that innocent 12-year-old boy. Some places it's written 14-year-old boy. They picked up that 14-year-old boy, Bobby. They even sent a note to his parents that they had to pay a ransom. And then later on, it became clear that it was Nathan Leopold and Robert&Loeb that killed Bobby Franken, and the reason is because they found Nathan Leopold's glasses near the boy's body. Just like they found the knife sheath near Maddie's legs in the crime scene, they found Leopold's glasses. This case was a big deal back in 1994 in Chicago because such kind of murders used not happen that often. The same here. In this case, it is 4 quadruple murders. It is a quadruple slain murder. So it's really disturbing. It's really sad. And I hope justice comes for this family. I hope these 4 families get the justice for their children. We will never get back these 4 beautiful victims. But the point is that justice is served right. I personally believe that Brian Kohberger did all this for attention. He was already depressed, he was suicidal, but he thought to go out in a bang, to go out in a name, and to get attention by going to court, by letting his prosecutor argue it. He may decide to speak a bit at the end. He still is doing it for attention. He could have easily ended this by just acknowledging that he's guilty. But he's not going to take accountability. He's not going to have remorse. He's not going to have empathy in case any parents of the victims or in case anyone in the public is believing that Mr. Kohberger is going to do what is right. He's never going to do what is right. He has no empathy. He has no remorse. Definitely, we've seen that. This seems to be something that he pre-planned for a very long time. For a very long time. And I won't be surprised if he studied cases, murder cases, like Leopold and Loeb. Nathan Leopold and Robert&Loeb. They did the thrill kill by abducting the 14-year-old boy Bobby and by killing him, and luckily Leopold's glasses fell near the crime scene. That's how they were caught. And these 2 men were very educated. not only very educated, apparently Nathan Leopold, his IQ was 200, above the normal people. So I wonder if this is the route or the route that he decided to take, Kohberger, after watching students who were so educated and had an IQ for 200, who were bored, who were just well privileged, and decided to do a thrill kill. Please let me know, guys, what you all think about it. Do you all believe that Brian Kohberger, who is arrested and charged for allegedly for the killings of Eaton Chipman, may God bless his soul, Madison May Morgan, may God bless her soul, Kaylee Congalvis, may God bless her soul, and Zana Kanoodle, may God bless her soul too. Could Mr. Brian Kohberger have read the case studies and the murders of Nathan Leopold, who had an IQ of 200, who could speak 28 languages fluently, and Leopold, who was well educated, who had an education in criminology. Sorry guys, this is my cat. It's too busy. I'm sorry. So guys, I was just wondering, let me know. I find it very fascinating that these two boys were well educated too. But it's just so sad that it seems to be making it a habit. Sammy, get down. Yeah, sorry guys, that's my cat Sammy. He managed to seem to get his ear, everything inside the camera. Say hello. Yeah, so please let me know what you all think about the Leopold, Nathan Leopold, his case in 1924 in Chicago, that they abducted, kidnapped the little boy, Bobby, and killed him. It was a kill for thrill. They just wanted to see if they could get away with murder. And I believe the same is with Mr. Kohberger. Although Mr. Kohberger, I believe, has a lot of mental issues. I've always said antisocial personality disorder before he was even arrested. For someone to have done such a horrific crime has to have really some personality issues, have to have some mental health disorders there. He refused to take any plea deal, and he refused to take a mental health evaluation. It's because I believe he wants to get away with the crimes. My cat and me, guys. So anyway, guys, I will end by saying have a lovely weekend. Please leave me a comment. Forgive me for my cat Sammy bouncing everywhere on my lap. And please let me know, what do you all think about this case? Do you all think that Brian Kohberger had a chance to read on this case? Have a lovely weekend and look after yourselves. Bye.